Hello everybody, you're very welcome today. My name is Roger O'Sullivan, and on behalf of the Institute of Public Health in Ireland and the All-Ireland Physical Activity and Ageing Group, I'm delighted to welcome you here to this event entitled Physical Activity in Older People, What Works? It's great actually, we've got a group of people who I would say are passionate and interested and will share their thoughts and interests and questions and concerns about this topic today. We know that being active is essential for good health, both physically and mentally. And the WHO guidelines suggest that people aged over 65 should engage in at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week. There were 3 more bullet points under those WHO guidelines that I read and thought, let's just keep it simple. Let's 150 minutes a week. We get into, is that 30 minutes a day? Can I break it up by 10 minutes? You'll be able to share your thoughts on that. But I'm struck on the issue of physical activity. If physical activity was a drug, would we talk about a miracle cure? Would we talk about a miracle drug? No, it has such benefits both physically and mentally. And then we go, our research shows us that as we age, our levels of physical activity decreases. And low levels of physical activity are evident among older people in Ireland, North and South today. 1 in 4 older people meet those WHO guidelines. And we must ask why. Why? What can we do? We know that effective public health interventions can help make a significant difference to our health and well-being. But we need to understand more fully what works and why and with whom. Those very basic questions. And of course, what doesn't work. Often we don't want to share what doesn't work, but as a researcher, I'm particularly interested in what doesn't work and understanding the reasons behind that. We need to identify and understand and address the barriers that people have to have increased participation in physical activity in Ireland, North and South, be they health related. Frank Doyle's here. He did a piece of research a number of years ago around pain. Pain is often seen as a barrier, but his piece of research looked at the importance of actually physical activity to the issue of pain. Environment. How does our environment affect our physical activity? Do more green spaces encourage physical activity? Do they not? There was quite a great debate on that before. Psychological barriers. Mary was talking to me here about the outlook that you have impacts upon your view. Are you confident about doing physical activity? Are you frightened of falling? Are you concerned that physical activity isn't for you? And of course, the social and economic barriers, inequalities around physical activity, gender. We must understand those and tackle them. Research indicates that we require a change both at an individual, a community and a structural level to encourage and support more and active lifestyles, but not just in the younger population, but across the life cycle. Let me be clear. The potential value of physical activity to us all as an individual and a society cannot be overestimated. Physical activity is today's best buy for public health. Today's event then provides an important all-island forum to share learning and to facilitate discussion on what works in the area of physical activity and older people and reflect our combined knowledge. Therefore, I have 3 requests. Share your insights today on what works and why. Ask questions to stimulate discussion and learning. And over at the end, or during, share your learning and set out to meet other people. Let me just run through a few housekeeping matters. Can you please change your phones to silence? I've been reminded to say this is the hashtag. IPAAG, so you've got a chance to tweet out there to those people who aren't here today. There are no fire tests planned for today, so if you hear an alarm, please make an orderly exit and do not use the lifts. We're talking about physical activity, so we have a large room. If you want to stand, you're more than welcome. We'll probably move to either side to do that. Or you want to stand at the back, you're very welcome. Now, sir, it's my great pleasure to welcome Andrew Boyd from the Royal College of General Practitioners. He is the clinical priority champion, the physical activity and lifestyle Public Health England, and the clinical champion for physical activity. And in between all those little other things, he's also a GP, and he's recently became a dad to a 3-month-old. So I want to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule. Anyone, when they get up in the morning, if you see the word or the letters 4 something on your alarm clock, you know it's early to get here. Or even if it says 5 something to get here. So thank you. So can we give Andrew a particular
Thank you, Roger. I think I was given one too many titles there.
Yes.
But just while this is coming up. Yeah, thank you very much for the invite. It's really nice to be back in Ireland. I haven't been here for quite a while, but I've forgotten just what an Irish welcome looks like, and I'm sure you can all hear me. But I know more, I just say this, I know more about Roger's family than I do about my own wife's family, and I only met him about 10 minutes ago. So it's just great to be here. I'm just going to adjust this a tiny bit on my screen, and then we'll start. Fine. So just like any other doctor I've ever met, and I say doctor, not surgeon, I've got imposter syndrome, and I've got it really badly today because I've met a few of you already, and there seems to be a lot of expertise in the room. And I'm definitely not an expert. I'm an enthusiast. He doesn't know how to get that to go down. I'm an enthusiast about physical activity, and I guess if I have any expertise, it's because I've been through the kind of recent journey of what's happened in the physical activity and health kind of journey in over the water, basically. So my kind of talk today really is to share what that's looked like from my perspective as a GP, seeing kind of cold-face GP, seeing face-to-face patients all the time, because that's my main job. Also as teaching as part of Public Health England's Clinical Champions programme, and confusingly, I'm also called a clinical champion, because everyone's champions these days, for the Royal College of GP's clinical priority around physical activity and lifestyle. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So how did I get here? As I say, I trained as a doctor, particularly interested in green issues, in end-of-life care, when I was med school and a junior doctor, and then in leadership in global health. And that just allows me to put a gratuitous shot of our blissfully baby-free existence when my wife and I went to work in Cambodia for a little while on quality improvement stuff. And then I came back to work in London, and I guess started to recognise that how important physical activity had been for me. When I was at school and university, I was terrible at all sort of team sports, anything involving a ball or where I had to throw my very insignificant weight around wasn't really for me. But I got into running and cycling, particularly cycling, and it's been really important for me personally in terms of my physical and mental well-being. And then, of course, from that you start to see the consequences of inactivity in your patients. That's certainly where I came at it from. And fortunately, soon after I qualified as a GP, there was an initiative called Everybody Active Every Day, which was something that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. And then on the back of that, I became the Ask GP lead for this area as well. So that's us on our tandem in Asia. But I put this picture up when I'm teaching medical students and other healthcare professionals That's me using my reasonably strong cycling legs, not at all, because they're just sitting there, and I'm on a hand trike there. So that's a hand trike where you pedal yourself around, essentially. And has anyone used them? They're really hard work if you don't use your arms very much. But for someone who's in a wheelchair, they can really be the difference between being independent and not, and being active and not. Because it's got a bigger wheel, you can sort of go up curbs and that sort of thing, which is more difficult to do in a regular wheelchair. And because you're cycling, even though with your arms, you can go a lot further. And the reason that I put that up there is to sort of remind us that really, as healthcare professionals, or allied healthcare professionals, or working in the sector, the people who we're going to make the most difference for from a health perspective are not people who are already doing tours around the world on their tandems. It's great, it's really nice to talk about it, great. But from the health perspective, it's the people who are otherwise disenfranchised and not expected to be physically active. People who are disabled, people who are poorer, people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds, women, older people, all the groups who have fewer role models in society and are not expected to be active. They're the people who we're going to make the most difference for. And I'll say that's how I sort of start my talks with other people when I'm talking about physical activity, conversations in the healthcare workplace. So a little bit about a national strategy. I may be teaching you to suck eggs here. I don't know how. I know very little about the Southern Irish healthcare system. So I'm very much talking about it from an NHS perspective. But in the UK, at least, Public Health England recognised that there was an epidemic, a crisis, whatever you want to call it, around inactivity and the health and economic consequences of it. And they launched a strategy called Everybody Active Every Day, which the aim of which obviously is what it says on the tin. Recognising, just as Roger said, that it's not one thing that's going to fix this. It's not one quick fix that we're going to, suddenly change the behaviour of an entire group of people. But recognising that as well as society being more generally active, environments being more activity friendly and doing things at scale, healthcare professionals have a really important part to play here. And that's really where my kind of career, aside from being coalface GP, is gone. And part of the Moving Professionals work stream has been to try and train as many healthcare professionals in the UK, not just doctors, but other healthcare professionals around physical activity. And I'll share some of the sort of insights from that in a minute. And this has dovetailed quite nicely with Sport England's change of tack, basically. So Sport England, as I understand Sport Ireland does, is the conduit through which money flows from the government to provide for sport in England. And they've changed very much from, really quite quickly, from funding elite sport, so kind of Olympic level and that sort of thing. They still do that, but and club sport, so people who are already active doing more kind of sport, to recognising that in terms of bang for your buck, as Roger said, it's those people who are least active who are going to benefit most from their cash. So again, moving away from just kind of the kind of getting more people to be sporty, to trying to focus on health, physical well-being, mental well-being, individual development, and then the sort of societal and environmental stuff as well as economic development. So their funding has also changed, which I think is really important when we're thinking about how how perhaps things can move forward here. That's an important change that they've made. And I spoke to Peter, who's part of Sport Ireland, and he was saying exactly the same. So that's music to my ears. I'll start off by talking a little bit about the work we've done as the PHE, the Public Health England Clinical Champions. So essentially, some of Sport England's money has gone through PHE to fund a load of clinical champions around the country, and this is the model that's been used to teach groups of healthcare professionals. So we basically have tried to hit grand rounds in hospitals, GP surgeries, GP trainee teaching sessions, protected learning time opportunities, anywhere where there's a group of 20, 30, 40, 50, however many healthcare professionals, and talk to them about physical activity and health for a couple of hours. And thus far, I don't know the latest numbers, but thousands and thousands and thousands of healthcare professionals have been trained using this model in the UK so far. Obviously, that's a small percentage in comparison to everyone out there, but it's a start. We based our teaching on the Chief Medical Officer guidelines, which, again, Roger just alluded to there, which is the famous sort of magic 150 minutes, along with sitting down less, building strength and improving balance. And this is very close to the WHO guidance, and in the devolved nations there's common consensus that this applies to all of our adult population. So when we think about older people, this guidance applies to anyone from 19 up to death, basically. And it's supported by some other, they come as infographics, so some other infographics that relate specifically to infants up to 5 years, who should be doing 3 hours a day of activity. Children 5 to 18, who should be doing an hour a day. And I mean, if we think we've got a problem with our existing adult population, we have a massive problem with the generations coming behind. And in recognition of the fact that there's a significant drop-off in activity levels when women become pregnant, and that's not regained at a population level, there's a reminder infographic that pregnant women up to the point where they can't do it anymore should be also getting their 150 minutes activity. So that's the sort of basis on which we base our teaching. I won't go through all the teaching we do because that's in itself an hour and a half. But essentially the lessons that we try and impart are to empower healthcare professionals. Okay, there's some good evidence that from a numbers needed to treat perspective, physical activity conversations do go down well, more effectively than smoking, which is something most healthcare professionals are very comfortable talking about. So making that kind of every contact count. A bit of national shaming. We can do this if you like. How the UK compares with the following countries for inactivity. Anyone would like to have a guess at where we fall in that pantheon of our other neighbours? Sorry? Bottom. Yeah. Correct. Most people say America must be worse, and they're disappointed when this slide is shown. So that's England is less active by this measure, which was published in the Lancet, compared to other similar economies in terms of GDP per capita. And a reminder that, again, that the people who are going to benefit the most, as this graph demonstrates, the people who are going to benefit the most in terms of years of life gained are those people, I don't know if this has got a red thing, yeah, those people who are doing nothing at the moment, okay? This line here it's different, it's in meta-hours per week, it's another measure of activity levels, which is predominantly used in the US and in academia, but this is the kind of equivalent of 150 minutes a week. By the time you cross that threshold, so that's roughly why the 150 minutes came about, you're starting to have a flattening of the graph. It's not that if you don't do more, you're not going to see some benefit in terms of years of life gained, but these people, if they just do a bit, they're going to have, free time. So it's very simplistic, and obviously it's at a population level, but it's just imparting some of these things that patients, that doctors and their teams can share with their patients. Roger talked about physical activity as a wonder drug. It's not a drug, and I think anything you put on a pedestal that high is going to be shot down a bit. So I tend to shy away from that. But I know exactly what he means, and it is pretty amazing when you look at the diseases that we see, particularly in primary care, but the diseases that are the epidemics of our generation in our society, and the relative risk reduction and the evidence base for them. So again, just putting that slide up for GPs who see, the fallout of strokes, depression, immobility, common cancers, just general functional limitation, OA, disability, and saying, look, this is how good being physically active versus being inactive can be. We think that's enough to just galvanise them to put it right to the top of their conversations that they're having with patients. we also, seeing as we're talking about older adults today, I do concentrate quite a bit on myth busting. So, you know, that I kind of talk about that older patient of mine who never leaves the house because her well-meaning daughter has said, it's best that you don't go out because if you go out you might fall and break your hip like you did 2 years ago. That is probably, it's so well-meaning, but it's probably the worst advice that patient could get because they sit there, their muscles waste, their bones become more osteoporotic, then when they do get up to go to the loo, which they can't get to because they can't move, they fall and then they break their hip and then they will not make it out of hospital because they're so deconditioned. Who is going to bust that myth if not the healthcare professional who they see, who's the only person they speak to apart from their daughter? So just empowering, I think, healthcare professionals to have those conversations can be helpful. So that's the sort of PHE side of things. So my role with the RCGP, so the RCGP is a membership organisation and it represents all the GPs in the UK. And so we had this sort of situation where we recognised that we had this problem, the same sort of numbers as you have in Ireland, with 25% of the UK adult population being inactive and much worse in older adults. Inactivity being the 4th biggest risk factor for non-communicable disease, and tied with it the incredible number of GP consultations that happen every year in the UK. And apparently, GPs discussing lifestyle often or always. So we did our own survey and we found that people apparently, self-reported of course, were discussing lifestyle often or always. So our question really was, why isn't that message getting through? So clearly teaching alone is probably not enough. Knowledge isn't enough. So we asked our membership, what are the barriers from your perspective? And I'm afraid it is primary care centric because we're the RCGP. And these are the 5 big hitters. Time. In England, in the UK, GPs roughly have 10 minutes with their patients. Not very much time when people never come in and say, I think I'd like to get a bit more active, doctor. That's not how conversations with GPs start. Any GPs in the room will attest to that, Andrew. The second thing was a lack of knowledge. There still is a perceived lack of knowledge, even though most GPs know something about 150 minutes sort of guidance. A fear of offending patients is very real. You know, an accusation that you're not active enough is often conflated with an accusation that you're overweight. Separate risk factors, really, really important. Inactivity, obesity, separate risk factors. A perceived lack of services locally. Mrs. Smith, how active are you? Oh, I know I'm not active enough for a good health doc. I'd like to be more active. What can you tell me about? I don't know. You know, there's that concern that if a conversation stops there, the ball's back in your court and you haven't told them anything. So it's better just not have the conversation in the first place. And reliability of services. Who can I trust? Am I signposting a patient to a service that's run by a cowboy, and if they have a heart attack or whatever, is that my fault? You know, very genuine concern. So these are the main barriers. And I think we learned really through the process and through talking to, I've now spoken to lots and lots of GPs and other healthcare professionals, quite a lot of patients, sort of patient advisors, and also politicians and people in the third sector and in the voluntary sector and in physical activity industry itself, so gym providers and that sort of thing. And I think what we've really learned is that behaviour change takes time. That's the biggest thing. We're all impatient because we're all activists and we want to kind of get stuff done. But think about smoking. We knew as a healthcare body long before I was born that smoking was really bad for your health. But it took a long time. Number one, for doctors to stop smoking. Number two, for doctors to stop colluding with patients and not mentioning it. And then eventually for it to be part of the kind of normal conversation we have with patients. It's taken 40 or 50 years since there was evidence that smoking was bad for us. So physical activity is very much the new kind of kid on the block, and we shouldn't expect our already busy, asked to do lots of things, healthcare professionals to immediately just chuck that into the pot as well when they're being asked to do lots of other things. So as I said, be kind, I suppose, is that bit. The PhD teaching or other teaching will reach some, but not all. It's really very difficult to, once people are out of med school and independent healthcare practitioners, it's very difficult to reach everyone through kind of face-to-face teaching. I've learned there are some healthcare professionals doing some amazing work out there, really, really amazing stuff, but it's just very bitty and in pockets. And if you can start to join those people up, and if you can start for those people to teach other people and to share their ideas, then that can be really, really powerful. We learn best from our peers, patients certainly do, and we do as well. There is an appetite for this, okay? A few years ago, I would have said, I'm not so sure, I don't think, it's too much of a stretch to expect doctors to be talking to patients about physical activity and all the rest of it. There really is an appetite for it. I truly believe, I've spoken to so many people who say, I am talking to all of my patients about physical activity before this teaching session, I do it already, but it's not everyone. The concerns around the medico-legal limbo are very genuine. As I alluded to before, if I send you off to the gym and you have a heart attack, is it the gym instructor's fault? Is it my fault? Is it the patient's fault, or is it no one's fault? And there isn't clarity around that, and that's really important and a very difficult nut to crack, and I'm very interested to hear anyone who's got views on that later, because we're looking at it, but it's difficult. And one size doesn't necessarily fit all. So, moving on to solutions. Knowledge is part of it, but knowledge can be provided in lots of different ways, can't it? We at the college have developed something called the RCGP Toolkit for Physical Activity, which is just about to be launched, and a big component of it is some disease-specific information sheets called Motivate to Move. It's all freely accessible, so if you Google RCGP Physical Activity Toolkit, in about a week's time it will be up there. So please share that and please use it. We're doing some podcasts, we've done some videos, we've got representation from our very small and part-time team at regional workshops, conferences, quite a lot of, because it's quite zeitgeist, actually it's quite popular at the moment, people are interested to hear from us, and quite a good media presence, mainly through my partner in crime, Dr. Zoe Williams, who's on the telly all the time in England anyway. And the other thing that I'll draw your attention to is something called moving medicine, which is a little bit different from Motivate to Move. And has anyone heard of moving medicine? So moving medicine is a kind of online resource that sits on your desktop. It's been developed in conjunction with quite a lot of the Royal Colleges of different specialties of medicine in the UK, and again, disease-specific physical activity guidance for healthcare professionals to use with their patients. I'll try and click here, but have we got internet, Alan?
I don't think I have.
No, okay. If you Google, it's live now, so if you Google moving medicine, it's a free to access, really good resource. It's been really well funded and really well put together by patients, and it's had input from everyone you can imagine, and I was particularly involved with the primary prevention module on that, so do use that and share it. It's a really good resource. So there's some sort of knowledge solutions that I think could be replicated or used elsewhere. I said I wasn't an expert, but I do describe myself as an advocate, and I think there's a huge case for the medical profession to be re-empowered, particularly around this. The evidence around physical activity is pretty uncontroversial. It's not funded or by big pharma. The evidence is pretty good. We've sometimes perhaps overstated the evidence around certain conditions. There was a recent study that kind of downgraded the efficacy of physical activity in the context of Alzheimer's, but broadly it's pretty good evidence. And we should be empowering our kind of coalface clinicians to be advocates for it themselves. So we've done a few things, we've been involved in a few things, and because it's all quite new, I don't have a lot of evidence to sort of back up the efficacy of it yet, but I'm hoping it will come on board. And I'll just talk you through them because I think they're quite exciting. We've developed something called the Active Practice, which is where we've got medical students who have a placement in GP practices, and that was there anyway. and they have to do a quality improvement project. So we thought, well, why don't they do a quality improvement project around making the practice more active? And they've got away and done that. And medical students are amazing because they're not sullied by the kind of cynicism of the burnt-out, middle-aged, tired-out GP. They'll go and do something really cool. And so we've got them burrowing away for free in GP practices where they're based already. So again, possibly something that could be replicated. We've spoken to commissioners, we've spoken to surgeries themselves around why for them the physical activity in the context of health case is good for them. For commissioners, a bit of money now, really could see dividends down the line. Not always an easy sell, but we're having those conversations. For surgeries, for individual surgeries, in the UK model, where we get paid per patient who's registered with us, but not for each individual patient contact, our favourite patient is the one who never darkens our door, right? And that's the same in Northern Ireland, right? I don't understand, but not in Southern Ireland. And that's our favourite patient. So if we've got our patients happier and healthier and in mind and body because they're more physically active, then a little bit of work to get them on that track surely is good value for a practice. For the physical activity sector, they recognise that there is this massive untapped market of people who could and should be using their facilities, going on their classes and all the rest of it. Again, they might not be having quite the right language with the sort of people who aren't already active. So again, having those conversations, breaking down those kind of invisible barriers between the sector and health, where our aim is ultimately the same. So I encourage individuals certainly to go and talk to their local providers and say, well, what deals could you offer my patients? What's wrong with that? GPs surgeries in the UK, at least, for far too long have been closed shops. It doesn't have to be like that. But some people just need to be given permission to go and have those conversations. And again, ditto the voluntary and third sector. Their raison d'etre is to is to see as many of the patients or people that have got whatever area of interest they're involved in, be it if they're doing dance classes for older Somali women in Lambeth. Well, who's going to put them in touch with those people? They're GPs. We see them. We know who those people are. As I say, I've touched on the medical legal side of things. What we'd really like to develop is universal kind of cross-sector statements essentially around that, so everyone's clear about where responsibility lies when a healthcare professional refers or signposts to physical activity opportunities. And I do believe that doctors and healthcare professionals should be leaders. They've lost that role. Not leaders at a national level necessarily, although that can happen, but leaders at a local level. With that hat on, you can knock on the door of your MP, your local schools, your local nurseries, anywhere, and start a conversation. That's a pretty privileged position to be in, but we've forgotten how to do that. And this is an area where, yes, some top-down funding and policy can help, but also I believe it's really important that it's done at a local level as well. Doctors as leaders. Yeah, and this is just something, just a little kind of reminder to me, really. I've got a standing desk at work. I got it because I had a bad back, and after 12 hours at a desk, because you should never sit down for 12 hours, obviously. In fact, you should never be at work for 12 hours. But I've got a standing desk, and I mentioned it in a conference last year, and it got picked up by 4 national papers. And the desk company were very pleased with me, and they've now provided off the record, provided my entire surgery with standing desks, which was a nice little side product. But my point is that actually, I just said it in response to a question at a conference where there happened to be some journalists there. And the journalists were there because they're also interested in physical activity stories because it's quite popular at the moment. And it won't be forever, so we need to cling to that and move while the iron's hot. But the word got out, and now people have been writing to me and asking me about standing desks. They're not a panacea, incidentally, but it just demonstrates that we can be leaders even without realising it. A little bit about my sort of tips for becoming a local leader. As I say, look for allies locally. There will be other people, and again, perhaps this is pitched more at kind of individual healthcare professionals, but if you have some sway over people like that, my recommendation to them would be to look for local allies. There will be people in their area who are doing great things, who want to collaborate. It's really hard to do something completely on your own. It's much easier to do it if you've got some buddies to do it with. Networks, phones and computers mean that networks are the easiest thing in the world to set up, with WhatsApp, with LinkedIn, whatever. And if there isn't a network in your area of expertise, then create one. It's really easy. Conversations happen, and from conversation, action sometimes happens. There's a lot around lifestyle medicine at the moment, and I'll just signpost you to the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, which is a good resource, which I don't know if any of you have got contacts with, but I'm very happy to put you in contact with the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, because they're very much on board with sort of functional, non-pharma aspects of healthcare. And as you'll know, lots and lots of events, particularly in the UK, around physical activity listed there. So just a sort of few, perhaps not so relevant for you guys, but for people who are looking into developing something like it. The final thing I'll talk about, because I think I'm probably due to wind up. Hi. The final thing I'll mention is social prescribing. Is social prescribing a thing in Ireland?
Yeah.
Great. More than the UK, perhaps? I don't know. So does anyone not know what social prescribing is? Don't be shy. Social prescribing essentially is where healthcare professionals, normally it doesn't have to be, signpost patients to a non-medical service which is intended to help their health problems. So lots of patients will come to me with ostensibly with a headache, and actually when you delve into it, they've got a headache because their house, they've got a 2-bedroom damp flat with 5 children, and they're in rent arrears, and they're just really, really, really stressed. And they don't need me to work them up through a medical model and send them for CT scans and all this sort of thing to find out if they've got a brain tumour. What they need is to go and talk to someone about how they get into a better accommodation, how they sort out their money problems, and that's social prescribing in action. That's in its simplest form, but another model is to have a social prescriber embedded within a healthcare system. So Mrs. Smith comes to see me. She wants to be more active. She doesn't know she wants to be more active, but she does, because I've just had a conversation with her about that. But she's terrified of going into a gym herself. When I first did a BMF class, a British Military Fitness class, I'm a young, educated, active guy. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, and it reminded me that actually just to send someone off to a gym, the chance of them doing that, unless they're highly motivated and highly thick-skinned, is that they won't do it. So the social prescriber will perhaps take them along to that class, we'll talk to them about all the other opportunities that are there, we'll buddy them up with someone else who could take them, and etc, etc. So that's sort of a very quick overview of social prescribing. I don't think it's a panacea, but I think it really fits very well with the subject that we're talking about today. GPs and other healthcare professionals cannot be expected to do the whole thing. Okay, we just can't. I don't know about everything that's in my immediate area at all, and I'm really, really interested in this agenda because there's too much stuff going on. I live in South London, work in South London, and there's loads and loads of stuff happening locally. But at least I can sow the seed. And it's not very good value for a doctor or another healthcare professional whose expertise is around all sorts of other things to be having a long, in-depth, motivational, interviewing style conversation with a patient about what's really important to them. But someone who's got expertise in that, who's not a healthcare professional, it may well be very good value for them to do that. And they can have in-depth knowledge of local services, and they can signpost them to the right sort of thing. Our health secretary's promised universal access by 2023, I think, of social prescribing, and I think our role as physical activity advocates is to make sure that physical activity is embedded in that offer. So if you know about stuff that's happening locally, ask them, where does physical activity fit into this? It should, getting to classes. Does it have to be in a bus? Could people walk? Could people go on a side-by-side bike? I don't know. But I think it is important. Our very, very, very little and free social prescribing project in my own practice, it's projected terribly here. That's where my practice is. This is Clapham. This is Clapham actually. This is my bit of Clapham, and that's where our surgery is. And what we did was we got members of the patient participation group to go. That was their idea, in fact, to go and map all of our assets locally. our churches, our coffee shops, our physical activity providers for sure, Tai Chi classes, all sorts of things. There was loads of stuff there. Only some of this was marked with these little dots, but there was loads of stuff there that we just didn't know about as a practice, which seems crazy. We're a hub within that community, and we don't know about what's going on. So that was a really, I guess I put it up there just to demonstrate that these things don't necessarily take lots of funding. They just take someone to say, why don't we do this, and someone to go and do it. And this is my practice manager Chris here on a side-by-side bike actually with a charity that we found through this program, through this approach, that does that takes people who are disabled to do their shopping. We didn't know about it. How are you going to find out unless you go and walk the streets basically? Nationally, the RCGP's paired up with Parkrun. Does everyone know about Parkrun? Free 5K, very unintimidating runs, walks, volunteer, whatever you want to do, runs that happen all around the UK and Ireland, and indeed worldwide. It's now in 20 countries. And we've partnered with them, and it's a very light touch approach. A GP practice just signs up with a local parkrun and signposts patients to it, and perhaps goes along and does the run with some patients, once or twice or 3 times or whatever, and goes from there. We launched it 2 months ago, and we've had 500 practices sign up to it. So again, if you give people offers, there's no financial incentive attached to it. It's just a partnership between 2 local trusted assets, the GP practice and Parkrun, and it's gone down really, really well. I can talk more about that later if people are interested. Finally, I recognise I'm out of time. I was asked to talk about the future. I think I'd like to see surgeries as sort of wellness centres rather than centres for ill health. I mean, that would be my kind of overriding wish. That physical activity is the norm, not just for weirdos in lycra, but for everyone. We need to embed it in other healthcare priorities. There's a lot of stuff around patient-centred care, around clustering of GP practices in the UK, around resilience and kind of burnout of GPs, around loneliness. The loneliness agenda is really big at the moment. If we think strategically and latch onto those things, and I don't know what the big agenda items are here, but there will be things that if you think a little bit laterally, you can plug it into. I suppose having positive partnerships across sectors, both nationwide and locally. I'll wrap through a bit at the end next. I was watching the clock. There are a few resources there. Again, they're very kind of UK-centric, I'm afraid, but they're all free to access, and there's just some ideas there for you, and I'm sure we can share these later on. And if you want to contact me, that's my email address. If you're interested in the PHE, Clinical Champions, if you're thinking maybe we can replicate this in Southern Ireland or Northern Ireland, then that's the generic contact for that. And there's just the link to the BSLM as well. Thank you.
Mind the previous slide again?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Oh, great! This is great. We've got one at the back. If you just introduce yourself and then just ask a question.
Morgan Crow. I'm a geriatrician actually working in a rehabilitation unit. I'm just clearly you're very passionate about it, and certainly there's great evidence to indicate about the benefits of exercise, and paradoxically, the elderly probably will benefit from it more than most. But I just wonder, are we in danger of overselling how simple an intervention it is? Because things do happen, and you described that patient with a fractured hip, and you told her she should be out walking. We found that our incidence of fractures actually increases as patients actually become more mobile. Clearly, overall, the benefits will outweigh the risks. But there are risks, and I think that certainly as regards the elderly, their activity programs need to be monitored. Secondly, we found in our day hospital, whilst physios are great for intervening and receive fantastic benefits, but when the patient stops attending, we don't have a clue what happens to them, and we suspect they probably stop exercising. So I think just as regards the elderly, we do need to be careful, they do need to be monitored, and ideally monitored probably over a longer period of time than, say, younger people.
It's a common.
Yeah. No, I agree. There are definitely, like any intervention, there will be some people who have a negative outcome from it, like a fall. I think it touches on the other thing about, I guess, around. Although we've perhaps talked about activity, what we're really just talking about moving. We're just really talking about, for some people, just being able to continue to walk. Because actually, most old people, and you speak to a lot more old people than I have, actually what they're really bothered about, they don't care about what their HbA1c is doing, they don't care about what their cholesterol is. What they want is to be able to see their grandchildren grow up, and they want to be able to get to the loo without wetting themselves. And that's a real line in the sand for a lot of people. And if you can, to be honest, I will say there's a risk that you might fall down the street, but you might break your hip, you might have a heart attack, whatever. But often they'll say, well, actually, I just want to be able to keep doing what I can do. But it's the conversation. It cannot be done in 10 minutes. That's the real problem for me as a GP.
Mark, thank you for that question. Actually, after this, Conor Breen's working, or Conor Cunningham's working on this area in the Institute of Public Health about older people, clinical guidelines, and a programme of research around that. So if you connect after that, Peter,
yes,
you've got Smith.
Understand.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, at one of our previous events, I think, didn't you do a lovely exercise to get people doing? We might have to do that. We might have to call on you to do that before we go into the next session. Go ahead.
Peter Smith from Sport Ireland. Really intriguing presentation. I was really interested in the slide around the sort of number of conversations that were required to change non-smokers to smokers and inactive to active.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually sort of it's a very positive slide. I read it as that it needed 12 conversations to change one inactive person to an active person. I mean, I'd love to know the provenance of that, but if that is the case, then it does seem to be
I'll share the reference with you.
A pivotal piece of information around why the 10-minute conversations.
I would have thought, because we have used that statistic in our making of the contact count training around physical activity. My reflection that comes from Nice, and it is that kind of if you routinely do it, 1 in every 12 patients that you have the conversation with will make a change in their behaviour. So it just shows kind of the benefit of having the conversation with the bigger number of all. It's actually 12 conversations are required to make one person do something.
It's from the British.
12 meaningful conversations, I would imagine. 10 minutes is clearly not going to allow for much of a meaning.
Well, I said at the start, anyone remind me, I said I'm not an academic, I must say I haven't read the paper, but I've got the reference for it here, and I was using it as much to illustrate what we talked about in the PhD teaching. Very happy to share the reference with you, Peter, afterwards.
But I think that actually was the slide, Peter, that I picked up on as well. And I think for me, when I observed that, was actually, the change that's more easier than the other. And for me, that was an illustration. Smoking versus physical. The conversation with that is actually, how do you know to continue it? How do that's a different one. Now we've got quite a few different questions. We've got Fiona, and then we've got Fozzie at the back. Fiona's.
Fiona Manzer, Department of Health. I was just wondering, I was sitting in on a presentation from the Irish Longitudinal Study on Ageing, and we've just been having this discussion about older people and falls, and one of the interesting things that came out of this study, which has quite a large sample size and is tracking older people in waves over a quite long period of time, is that they had discovered that over-medicating people for blood pressure, and even quite low levels of blood pressure medication, can increase the incidence of falls. And is that something that could be looked at a bit more carefully in terms of also encouraging people to increase their activity levels, which might actually have a positive effect on blood pressure as well, instead of the drugs?
Yeah. I mean, this is a massive thing, isn't it? We have healthcare professionals have been trained in a medical model. We are comfortable and used to prescribing drugs. We've been courted by pharma for years, decades, and we're very comfortable adding medications. We're much less comfortable removing them. There is something inbuilt in the psyche of Western healthcare that means that we're much more comfortable. Apart from, I would say, not just because he's sitting at the back, the geriatricians are actually much more comfortable as a rule culling medicines, but it's much easier to just say, oh, let's just keep things as they are. Again, for that fear of, I don't know if anyone's ever been successfully or even attempted to have been sued for this, but what would happen if I said, let's stop a couple of your blood pressure medications, you get a bit more active, and then you had a stroke a week later. I don't know, but there's that perception of fear around that.
You could turn that on its head in that if people are initially prescribed blood pressure medications and then have to fall or break a hip, then you could also be.
Yes, yeah. I do not believe, for the record, that that this kind of pill for every ill mentality. This is medicine's not bad. I'm not kind of that alternative, but they're clearly. If you look at the numbers needed to treat for a lot of medications, it seems we've got that slide up there now. If we look at numbers needed to treat for a lot of medications, particularly for older patients, there will, in time, be a kind of, I think it's already started, a backlash against the huge over-medication of vast quantities of our older population. It's terrible. And to huge cost and economic cost and for often little benefit. And physical activity is much cheaper and has all the benefits, all those other benefits. You don't get community, you don't get to meet your neighbours by taking pills, but you might if you went for a walk.
Okay, I've got Fawzia. I'm conscious of the time because I'd like to get you. I'm running behind a little bit on this here. So no, it's okay. Fawzia, go ahead. You.
Thank you for the presentation. As healthcare professionals, where are we today? Are we worse than the general population when it comes to meeting physical activity guidelines? And if we have to lead by example, where are we? Are we better? Because we are high socioeconomic status. We are supposed to be educated. So where do we start?
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. So we asked this question of our members. Now we were there was massive reporting bias because the people who were responding to a voluntary questionnaire around physical activity were likely to be more active, and they were. I think about 80% of the people of the doctors that we surveyed said they were meeting or exceeding the guidance, the 150 minutes. There was another study that was published. I think one of the lead authors was Justin Varney from Public Health England, which you talked about, which said that we were, as a profession, we were very much in keeping with the general population. So we were sort of matched for our age and gender and ethnicity compared. So I would be, as a doctor, I would be no more or less active than another 30-somethings, a white male in the population. So I think we should probably assume that we're about the same as our patients. Yeah, and you're right, leading by example is really, really important. And I think sharing the difficulties, like if I find it difficult to go and get my 150 minutes, then share it with my patient. I know what it's like because I've got a job and a new baby and I'm trying to juggle it as well. But let's talk about priorities, let's talk about what's important to you, let's see if you can squeeze it in some way. I squeeze it in by cycling to work, not taking the bus. Could that be an option for you? Those conversations.
Thank you. You want to ask her? Go for it.
It's not a question, it's more...
If you could introduce yourself.
Sorry, Sarah O'Brien. I'm the National Lead for Healthy Eating and Active Living within the Health Service Executive here. And I suppose I just wanted to say it's fantastic what you're doing. I really like the idea of the clinical champions about that peer-to-peer learning piece. But I wanted to maybe share for people in the audience here some things that are happening in Ireland currently in our health services that we're putting in place to move this agenda along. So one of them is we have a program similar to your Making Every Contact Count in the UK, where we now this year have started rolling out across our health service for all frontline health professionals, and there's engagement with the higher education institutes who train all the undergraduate health professionals and some of the professional bodies as well. a training program for making every contact count, so that our health professionals are equipped to have a brief intervention with a patient around any of the 4 topics of physical activity, healthy eating, smoking, and alcohol is the other one. So we're really, I suppose we're really encouraged with that, and we're hoping that it will really kind of make an impact in terms of people's skill base and comfort around it. The other one, just in relation to social prescribing, there's pockets of social prescribing happening in different parts of the country at the various levels that you were talking about there. But one thing that will really help that is we now have within each of our community health organisations a self-management support coordinator people who've just started, and one of their roles is to map within the geographical area the supports that are there within communities for people who have one-off for key chronic diseases, diabetes, I think stroke, coronary heart disease, and I can't remember what the other COPD. So that would be like it's focus on those, but it's a really good infrastructure to start at building that up. But like I said, there are out in St James, there's a really good project where they've done local area mapping.
Yeah.
That walking out around your area, seeing what's there, putting it in a database, sharing it with GPs and medics in the hospital as well.
Right.
So they can
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, look,
Fantastic. I'm here to learn as well, so yeah, really interesting.
so thank you again, Andrew. That's been really, really great. Thank you very much. Lee, it's over to you now. Thank you, Lee, for going to chair this next session where we have a number of PhD presentations.
Great. I think you can hear me if I stand out here. Is that okay? Yeah, great. So we're just moving on to our next session now, and we have 4 presenters.